Hello and welcome to The Digital Insight, the technology, procurement and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those who are leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Welcome to The Digital Insight, the official podcast series for CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. In today's episode, I'm joined by Marc Imowitz, Senior Vice President of Procurement at TricorBraun. Marc explores the idea of transformation of both the role of procurement and that of the procurement professional. Marc also speaks to the need to communicate and champion the people in any procurement transformation, stressing the importance of taking time to stop and smell the roses along the way. Marc, welcome to The Digital Insight.
Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So can you tell me, as a way of beginning then, can you tell us a little bit about your sort of career journey, obviously in your experience and, obviously particularly from a procurement and supply chain perspective to how you find yourself today in your current role with TricorBraun?
Sure. So basically, what I have tried to do throughout my career is really two major facets, I would say. Number one, it's working with people that want to make a difference, working with people that are passionate in their areas. So for instance, the first 15, 20 years of my career, after a couple stints at Owens, Illinois at GE, I basically followed mentors to different organizations. So the first few years of my career, I was with Owens, Illinois and General Electric. Then I followed a mentor to H.B. Fuller to basically implement Lean Six Sigma transformational work there, and then followed another mentor, and then I did that for 6 years, and then followed another mentor to a company called PolyOne to basically kick off a business transformation there. And that's those two moves really got me interested in foundational transformation within an organization. So then the next couple of moves, frankly, drove me to look at opportunities where organizations needed foundational change. So my last role at PolyOne, I completely revamped the global supply chain of their distribution business. And then that got me interested in both transformation and procurement supply chain. So my moves correspondingly after that were really around foundational transformation in operations or supply chain. And that's what landed me at Tricor. Tricor grew up via a series of acquisitions. It's the number one largest rigid packaging distributor in North America, but had been doing business the same way for a long period of time and really needed to revamp really the whole go-to-market strategy, which links the sales rep to the customer and then correspondingly back to the solutions that we provide to those customers via the supply chain.
No, absolutely. And something that I sort of speak to a lot of people about, and it seems reading between the lines quite clear, you've seen this firsthand, but is this sort of evolution of what procurement and supply chain can mean to a business. Once upon a time, they may have been seen as separate business functions that, or even as a cost center, but more and more people now are telling me that they're becoming almost the most strategic part of a business, if not, the driver of change. Is this something you have seen firsthand and something you can speak to?
Absolutely. So for sure, as business has become, more transparent, more global, more automated, with data proliferation that customers have at their fingertips, procurement has become, way more strategic than it has in the past. To your point, I think, 5, 10, 15 years ago, procurement would be viewed as a cost center, and the only measurements around procurement would be VAVE, cost out, price point, lower price point, higher rebates. And for sure, customers expect more for less now, and you can't do that without a strategic procurement function that links, solutions, buying NPI solutions back to what the customer is wanting. And I think that's become more apparent as customers really want to get into new markets. They want to introduce new products faster. They sometimes don't know what they want. And so you need to have ready solutions and solution offerings to customers to help drive them into areas that they may not have even thought of. And you can't do that without understanding what your basket of options and solutions are to customers to bring to them early on in the process rather than picking through your current solutions once a customer comes up with what they like or what they want or what they believe they can be successful with in the marketplace. So I think it's I'm partial, obviously, I'm in supply chain, but I think it is the most strategic transformational element within an organization to improve performance.
And how has that changed the role of the procurement professional itself? So, you are Senior Vice President of Procurement. How is your role now completely different to, say, if you had the job, like you say, 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the main reasons why Tricor brought me on as the SVP of procurement is I have commercial experience. So as part of when I was at H.B. Fuller, I sold, I carried a bag. I've also done commercial transformations when I was at CDK. We completely revamped our go-to-market, our channel strategies, our sales compensation programs. So I think what's changing is you're not going to have forward-thinking companies put leaders and senior leaders into procurement that don't have the ability to see things from a customer or a salesperson's point of view. And so I think that's why the match at Tricor was so apparent was, as a distributor, what we do is, we need to understand what the customer solutions are and then find, opportunities within our value chain in order to provide them what they need. And that goes from design to marketing to shelf all the way to how the end customer, the retail customer is going to perceive that solution. And I think it's difficult to run procurement or supply chain without having that customer mindset and that sales rep mindset to understand how sales reps pull that information from customers unless you have that experience. So 10, 15 years ago, I think this job is filled by a classic, been in a buying, type of role for the past 15, 20 years, has worked his or her way up through a procurement organization to be a senior leader within procurement, and now is taking on a role like this. Whereas I think any type of senior leader, director, VP, senior VP and above in procurement needs to really have the customer and the salesperson in mind. And it's even more beneficial if they've participated throughout their career in those areas to know firsthand experience, what questions to ask a customer, how to educate a sales rep on how to get that information from customers in order to buy the most efficiently and effectively that you can as a senior leader within procurement.
Now, this might be a bit of a broad question, but similar line in terms of the evolution of, I guess the business and just the marketplace and just how the roles changed. How has the customer changed? What does a modern day, I know it's different depending on industry, but what would you say is some of the biggest changes about the customer in terms of how you interact with them and the demands that they have and how those demands and that engagement enforces one another?
Yeah, so a few ways. Number one, I'd say 10, 15 years ago when I ran supply chain, a lot of decisions were made by customers buying from who they trust, who they know, and really, having that personal relationship between a salesperson and a customer, and then correspondingly, shoving that solution back to supply chain to come up with something to buy. I would say again, with the proliferation of data and companies really, almost every space being just unbelievably competitive, every penny counts. And so you can't just depend on relationship if you're going to have quality issues or delivery issues, or you can't scope a solution appropriately to really provide that solution to a customer, from your basket of areas that you buy from. You just have to be better, and you really have to think globally at options across the spectrum and really be open-minded and help drive the end customer to what they're truly looking for by asking, open-ended questions and not just letting the customer, run that conversation. So I think that's one major way. And then the second way is, on the flip side, as you're buying, you need to really look at a lot of different options. You need to understand globally where low-cost producers are, where things might be changing. I mean, the China tariffs, for us and a lot of other organizations really changed things. And I feel like it was a blessing in disguise to really, enable us to think more broadly about where we could be purchasing solutions across the globe and not just depend on previous low-cost regions of the world like China. Really look at areas like India and Saudi Arabia and Vietnam, and what's the next phase of areas going to be, and really, understanding not just from a cost perspective, but from a quality and delivery perspective, because the timeline has shrunk in terms of design to solution for what customers expect. So it's not just a price point anymore. It's a complete value chain conversation with customers.
So tell me a little bit then about your role. As I understand, you were brought in to reorganize essentially the global supply chain function for Tricor. But give me a bit of an overview then as to exactly what that entails and what you've really been brought in to deliver for the company.
Yeah, so a couple ways. Like I said, Tricor is wildly successful. Number one, rigid packaging distributor in North America. The board brought a new CEO in. After a change in ownership, and really what Court wanted, and again, Court's a fantastic leader, a real visionary, from a leadership perspective, wanted to really look at different ways we could drive impact for our customers, and then correspondingly, obviously, we're in business, to improve our EBITDA and to put more money to the bottom line. And so what we needed to do was really relook at the way we operated, because in the past, what had happened, it was Tricor salespeople, who we call packaging consultants, would really be in charge everything from soup to nuts, from design all the way to finding the solution from a supplier perspective for their customers. And as we built the supply chain org over the last 3 to 4 years under Marc O'Brien's tutelage, who is my boss as the COO, is we want to really enable our salespeople to focus more on pipeline and customer solution, and allow some of these buying decisions to go through a professional procurement organization, so we could take advantage of our breadth and depth, as well as to hold suppliers more accountable for their performance from a quality and a delivery perspective. So you need a professional strategic sourcing organization in order to do that. And that's what I was brought on board to basically help drive. It was already started under Court and Marc, and then I was brought on to kind of take it to the next level. As
you said then, of course, so it was already sort of the wheels were already in motion, and then you're now here to drive that forward. But sort of speaking broadly then about just transformations in general, one of the things that tends to come up in conversation is that obviously it's a little different for the company because, like I say, it's already in motion. But one of the first steps I always sort of like to find out about is communicating it to every area of the business, that this is exactly what we're trying to achieve. This is what transformation means, because for some people, you hear a transformation and I don't want to say alarm bells start ringing, but obviously it can cause confusion. People can perhaps fear for their jobs, fear for what the future is going to hold. So how do you go about communicating it, in the best possible way so that people understand exactly this is the right thing for the business?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, and I've gone through multiple transformations in my career, the ones that have worked the best, there was openness and transparency from senior leadership on why the transformation is being put in place. So it could be something that the market is dictating, in order for survival, you need to transform. It could be, frankly, from a financial performance perspective. If it's a public company, the board and the senior leadership and the stockholders expect a different performance, or if it's a private company, the performance needs to be improved from a financial perspective. Or it could just be that you have a golden opportunity as a leader in the space to take the industry to the next level. So for me, I find the openness and the honesty. People, if you don't communicate across the organization and you don't do it frequently and you don't use various mediums of communication, and I'm talking about webcasts, emails, town halls, people are going to fill in the gaps, and they're going to believe what they want to believe if they're not told specifically why, when, how this is going to happen. And then I think that the second piece, which I think gets lost in a lot of organizations, and I really made sure at places like CDK and Tricor, this didn't happen. You need to make it personal for every individual in the organization. So you really should be tying every individual's goals and objectives to a component of the transformation to show how their daily work and making changes in their daily work or improvements or modifications is going to help, them succeed in their area of expertise where they work, and how that's going to help drive the transformation, which should lead to, overall improved company performance. Because if you don't make it personal, then to your point, people just feel like it's happening in a bubble. They're not involved. They don't know what's going on. And so they feel like something's going to be done to them rather than participating in the transformation. Even if they're not in the, day-to-day execution of the transformation, if they see a line of sight for the activities that they perform on a daily basis and how that ties back to how they're being measured and how that's going to, relate back to overall company performance as part of the transformation, and you make it personal, it goes, significantly better.
You said earlier on about how you had the sort of the sales side of it, which I believe you described as packaging consultants. Do you think the sort of traditional lines between, well, you're a procurement professional, this person's a sales professional, this person's an IT professional, each person has their own expertise, and if it's a procurement question, put it to the procurement guy. If it's a sales question, put it to the sales guy, etc. Do you think those lines are blurring now, so that actually, as a salesperson, as an IT person, or as someone, as all areas of the business kind of have to have cross expertise?
So I don't know if you need cross expertise, but you definitely need cross communication and you need cross collaboration. So to me, organizations that flourish are ones that are laser focused on the customer. So to me, it's all about, is an organization set up to be nimble, to be responsive, to be, focused specifically on growth of the customer at the most efficient and effective, cost model possible. So that's why those lines are blurring, because, 10, 15 years ago, an IT professional may not have ever thought about the customer. But if we're putting new technology in place, if we're driving, some type of technological advance, if we're using technology to buy smarter and faster, that should relate back to getting solutions to the customer at a more efficient cost model, which then we can take market share, we can gain new opportunities, and then the salespeople, see that, and they can drive solutions and drive, new pipeline opportunities if the organization is aligned to be completely focused on the customer. And I think that's why those lines are being blurred, because really every group from HR to IT to procurement to sales to finance needs to really be customer focused and market focused to understand where the organization should go.
I guess there's no real easy answer to this, but obviously you've said it a lot, and a lot of people say it, and it is kind of a key driver, but it's, you talked about focusing on that customer and essentially having that customer be the overall key driver of change. Like, yeah, of course you have, internal targets you have to hit and you have internal factors, but overall it is kind of to better work with that customer. How hard and how much of a balancing act is it to try and maintain that? So obviously you are transforming, you are implementing changes, and the path that you're going down might veer into different directions, but ultimately you want to better serve that customer. How do you go about keeping that customer right at the center of everything?
So again, I think measurements at the senior level are important. So really, and I think Tricor does a good job of this. Court did a good job of aligning, customer satisfaction, customer growth. Obviously, if you're pleasing the customer, you're intently, you're growing. And so I think growth needs to be a component of even if you're the CIO or the CFO, growth and profitable growth should be a component of that senior leader's measurements. And then that should enable that, individual, that guy or gal, to drive, growth components through their organization if they're getting measured on it. And then I think, again, it's all about the communication. So where are we succeeding? Where do we need to pivot? Where are we not doing such a great job? And how nimble is the organization around being able to change? And then how open is the organization to getting input from all levels of the organization on what's really happening? Because, I as an SVP, I'm only going to see certain things. I may not be in the weeds as much as one of my buyers is or a salesperson is. So what's the feedback mechanism? What are the loops of communication, through the organization to be able to take that information and act on it, so people see that, you're serious about the customer being in the center of all actions and all activities in order to drive profitable growth. And so if they get feedback, as a salesperson or a financial analyst or, as a buyer, their voices are heard, and they see, you may not do everything with that information, but they need to know they're being heard, and that that information is getting synthesized internally in order to potentially pivot, solutions to drive profitable growth.
Something you mentioned at the start, you said about your sort of career direction is you've kind of always followed mentors. Again, this is something that's come up in previous conversations when talking about a transformation, about sort of trying to establish whether it's mentors or whether it's sort of role models. And I guess you've already said it about how leadership has been very open, very on board, very engaging, almost, that has been very sort of a key driver and saying, this is what we want to do, and has been very open and transparent about that. How much do you think then that you would like to, I'm trying to think of the best way, that your own career path where you've had that sort of mentorship figure and you've sort of learned and followed along, are you trying to instill as part of this transformation?
Yeah, so I think let me make sure I understand what you're asking. So as I, have grown up through my career, obviously I've transitioned from more of a mentee to a mentor.
Yeah.
And again, that's to me, transformation is obviously all about the customer, but it's also obviously all about the people. So, everyone's got to be in the boat. I'm sure everyone says this that you talk to. Everyone's got to be rowing in the same direction. And so as I've progressed throughout my career and been given more accountability, responsibility, larger teams, I find that I spend more and more of my time on mentoring, on leadership, on goal and objective setting that's tied to the strategy of the organization. Because again, the people that are going to get the transformation done are not the CEO, the CFO, the SVPs. It's going to be the people in the field. It's going to be the buyers. It's going to be the quality people. It's going to be, the people, the doers within the organization. And so you need to have strong leaders that take mentorship seriously and actually enjoy doing that. And it's not a kind of a heavy-handed, given down by leadership. So I think you need people leaders always to do some type of transformation, because if you don't have that and it's just a board directive or a CEO directive, it's going to stop at the leadership level because people aren't going to be bought in. But again, if they feel like they're being listened to, if they feel like their daily work, their goals and objectives are tied to the overall organizational success, that's when you're going to get everyone on board, driving the change. And I think you need to be realistic within an organization that, everybody's different. I may have just joined the organization, so I don't know anything about the org. I need to be, communicated to a different way than maybe someone that's been there 25 years and doesn't understand why we're changing anything at all, when I've been successful in my role as a packaging consultant or as an analyst or as a auditor. And so I think you need people leaders and mentors to know how to, really communicate to different people within their team, because it's not a one size fits all type of communication when you're trying to transform.
No, absolutely. And we've touched it a little bit, but obviously technology is an inescapable thing. Even if it's not the key part of the transformation, obviously it will form a part of the transformation, and you've already mentioned it already. So give me a bit of an overview then as to how technology fits into this transformation, and ultimately, how do you go about selecting and implementing the right technology as opposed to just, well, this is new, this is shiny, let's put this in?
So I think where organizations fail, and what I've seen in the past, is they put kind of the cart before the horse. So they start with technology because, they may have a technological salesperson or sales group come in and say, this is what this technology is going to do for you. But then that technology, the people selling you that technology don't understand your organization. So that's a little bit of cart before the horse. So what I always start with, when I'm in meetings, where we're talking about transformation, is, to me, it's always people, then process, then tools. And I put technology within the tools section of that. So you really need to understand the people in your org. You need to understand your processes, where some of the non-value added activity is, where the loops are, where the waste is. And then you can start talking about technology as a solution to help solve some of your process gaps or process overflow or process non-value added activity that you want to eliminate. But you need to understand the people first, the process second, and the tools third. So I always, make sure we slow down and really start doing a lot of process mapping and people understanding and really, around the people side of things and the change management around the people, and then understanding the processes before we focus on the solution. But there's no question that technology is a game changer when it comes to automation, non-value added activity, really allowing, individuals within the organization to focus on, value solutions and really human driven solutions versus just, crunching of data or, if you're not using a CRM system, your salespeople, are spending a lot of time on non-value added activities there where that could be automated. So again, technology is a game changer. I always try to choose my solution providers from a technology perspective on ones that I can integrate into my people and my processes versus just what's the lowest price solution I can put in and listening to the spiel of a solution provider on what it's going to drive. Because they're just going to take their boilerplate, pitch, and they're not going to understand my organization. Especially if I don't understand my organization, in order to push back and have them, philosophically align their technologically solution to what I'm trying to accomplish from a change management perspective.
Looking broadly then, just again, back at the sort of the overall transformation picture, and again, this can be over the course of your career, but also now, what do you think are some of the biggest hurdles, the biggest obstacles that they're inescapable, that no matter how well prepared you may be, you're going to face these challenges, and how do you go about overcoming them?
So I think, so some of the challenges are solvable. So again, some of the stuff I mentioned, if you don't have every senior leader on board and you have some blockers from a senior leader perspective, that's going to inhibit the amount of transformation you can really accomplish. And that's why, you really need to take a hard look as the board or the CEO, and really understand the skills and capabilities and where everyone is on the senior leadership team in terms of buying in on the transformation. And so I think you really need to do that, as a board /CEO before you try to really implement any kind of transformation. Once you do that, you need to understand that all the best plans can be put in place, but there are going to be challenges. There are going to be roadblocks. And how nimble are you to pivot and really focus on the critical path items of your transformation? Because the other mistake I see some organizations make is they try to do everything all at once as quick as possible. And so you need a phased approach. You need to understand what the most important components of your transformation are, and you need to have a multi-generational plan to know that there may be 7 things burning, but you can only really focus on 3 of the 7, and you need to have an understanding that you're going to phase in the rest of the 4 over time. But the 3, the critical 3, and this is something that Danaher does really well. That I learned there a few years ago. They have something called policy deployment, where they focus on 3 major things, and they align resources, capabilities, financial investments to those 3 things on an annualized basis. And they don't really, unless there's a dramatic market shift or a business change or an acquisition, they don't really vary from those 3 because they put a lot of thought and they put a lot of effort into understanding what those 3 most important items are, and they execute on those 3. So I think that's important, is to have a focus and a methodology to understand you can't do everything all at once. And then again, communicate. You can never over communicate when you're going through a transformation, and use different forms of medium, like I said, and have a communication plan that someone or a group of people owns on executing against, and then track it. And then, the other thing that I see that orgs don't do a great job of is you need to celebrate your successes. People are going to be working very hard. They're going to be out of their comfort zone, big or small. You need to celebrate the successes and have people, have some fun and have people excited about, the journey. And you can't wait till the end to have some celebrations, because you don't want fatigue setting in, halfway through. So you do need to really, recognize people, successes so people are excited about the journey that they're on.
Well, you're absolutely right, of course, that you should champion the successes. Do you think, and again, this is based on experience, but do you think that perhaps some people also forget that it's also important to look at, I don't want to use the word failures, but the things that don't work, that you can learn just as much from the things that don't work out as for the things that do work out?
Absolutely. And you need to have people, again, people need to be able to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and not be punished for those mistakes. Because again, a transformation is hard, and you're definitely going to have some misses. And those people should be, recognized for trying something, have it not worked, but having the understanding and the backing from the organization that they can pivot and do something different. And I think, to your point, as part of that communication plan, those items should be communicated. People need to feel comfortable to be able to stand up in a room or send an email and say, we all thought this was going to work. I took the lead on it and it didn't. And what we're going to do is we're going to learn from it, and we're going to do better the next time, or we're going to kill that project and start another one because we think it's going to be more impactful. And you need to have that organizational acceptance, like I said, that not everything is going to go according to plan. So I agree with you. It's a great point that, you want to celebrate your successes, but you want to recognize where things didn't go as planned and modify and pivot, as quick as possible to get back on track and to continue to drive in whatever area you kind of fell down in.
And to sort of zoom out then, so on paper, of course, you have day one and I guess the last day. You have an A to B and you think, right, that's where we want to get to. But obviously you aren't going to get to that end point and then just sit back and go, well, we're finished now. I guess my question really is then, can a transformation ever really end?
So it doesn't. Organizations that do this well, they may initially, they may have needed to change for a while, and they may needed to have a formal transformation program. But companies that do this well, we did it at CDK. We had a 3-year transformation program, but now that DNA is built within the company, and so that whole process improvement mindset, that waste reduction, that focus on the customer, that never stopping to look for solutions to change the market. Once you kind of had a formal transformation program built and executed, you've now built that DNA, that thought process. You now have leaders that can't think any other way. I grew up, implementing Lean Six Sigma in 2 different organizations. So, in both my personal and my professional life, that's just the way my brain works now. It's, how do we eliminate waste? How do we have a laser focus on the customer? How do we mentor, employees? How do we get people promoted? How do we put them in the best jobs to succeed? Because it's all about, executing and driving performance. And once you have that in a formal transformation program, you've built that DNA and you never really lose it. You may not have the formal program or the office that's driving it, but then you've proliferated it throughout the organization to everyone's just kind of doing it as their everyday life, as they're with a company that's gone through a transformation. So that's my long-winded way of saying no, it never ends.
And final question then, based on, obviously the course of your career and the experience you've had and shared, obviously there is no single way of doing everything, and each experience, each transformation has gone in a different direction, and you've learned along the way. If you could try and give one simple piece of advice that throughout all the chaos, all the kind of complexity and the difficulties and the ups and the downs, if they could follow this one piece of advice in order to not necessarily guarantee success, but to almost steady the ship at all times, what would it be?
To me, it all comes back to people, process, tools. Make sure you don't jump to conclusions, to solutions. Be very pragmatic about, looking at your people, looking at the process, and then, finding some tools to help you get there along the way. Again, where I've seen this fail is that equation gets reversed. So to me, make sure that you have leaders that are committed to the cause. You really focus on the people within your organization, and also be laser focused on the customer, because that's who pays the bills. And so for sure, make sure you're not doing it if you have an internal, especially if this is internally driven, due to financial performance or a turnaround required. You have to be laser focused on your customer and your people, and understand your processes, and then figure out what tools you need to automate and to become more efficient and effective. So that would be my biggest piece of advice is, follow the mantra of people, process, tools. And then again, really understand that it's going to be difficult and there's going to be some challenges along the way, and make sure to take time and smell the roses and celebrate successes to keep people motivated, because it's going to be a journey.
Perfect. Thank you, Marc.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast in association with the Interface.net and CPOstrategy.com. The Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate and review. And don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/The Digital Insight.